I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show.
All right, James, welcome back to another Ask Altucher.
Jay, I hope you have some good questions for me. To be fair, I haven't seen any questions. People can ask me about investments, the economy, relationships, politics, because I am officially running for president of the United States in 2024. So I'm happy to answer questions about the issues at hand.
Right.
I've written books about how I've gone from totally dead broke after selling a business to making it back, to going broke again, to making it back. So you don't necessarily have to listen to me. I've just been through a lot. I've been all over the place, metaphorically and literally.
All right. When you talk about the president one, I think that's a good one to start. Before I start asking the questions from this person named Rocco Desta from notepd.com, from notepad.com, let me ask you one question, just for my sake. I come from Malaysia. I come from a country that have prime minister. What does president of the United States do? Because like every time on the news I see like, hey, we have to ban gun or whatever, better healthcare for whatever. Why can't president just be like, you can no longer have guns? Or yes, everyone can have good healthcare. Like, what can they do? Like, doesn't seem like they can do anything.
That's a really good question, because a lot of countries around the world have what's called a parliamentary system, where the head of parliament is the prime minister, essentially the ruler of that country. And some countries, like the United States, have a president, like the United States has a president. And in many countries where there's a president and a prime minister, I can't think of an example offhand, but sometimes you have somebody who rules the country, and sometimes you have someone who's a figurehead that like goes to funerals and has dinners for the leaders of other countries and so on.
Right.
Like in England, it's a prime minister and there's a king. And the king is the figurehead ruler and the prime minister is the actual ruler. But in the United States, very technically, a president of the United States is elected by the people, sort of. There's an electoral college, but let's ignore that for a second.
Right.
So the president of the United States is elected by, there's an election day, all the people come to vote, and they vote for, like last election, they either voted for Donald Trump or Joe Biden. In England, or in a parliamentary system, the prime minister is not elected by the people. So what happens is everybody votes not for a prime minister or their opponent, but they vote for a member of parliament. And then parliament makes a vote to decide who the prime minister will be, who is the leader of the party. So in the United States, the equivalent of the prime minister would be the Speaker of the House. So right now,
Oh,
Kevin McCarthy, in a parliamentary system, he's the Speaker of the House in the US because the members of the House of Representatives, which is the equivalent to Parliament, the members of the House of Representatives voted for Kevin McCarthy to be their leader. And
gotcha.
how did he win? Not that he is the most popular of all the House of Representatives, but he's the most popular Republican. And we live in a two-party system in the United States, Democrats and Republicans. There's more Republicans in the House of Representatives. So the head of the Republicans in the House of Representatives becomes the Speaker of the House. And if the U.S. was a parliamentary system, he would be the prime minister. And Nancy Pelosi would have been the last prime minister. But as it stands, the Speaker of the House is third in line for the presidency, or second in line rather. If the president dies, the vice president takes over. If the vice president then dies, the Speaker of the House takes over. If the Speaker of the House dies, President pro tempore of the United States Senate takes over. And that's usually the oldest member of the majority party of the Senate. I actually don't know who it is.
I felt like that would be such a bad idea though.
Yeah, probably. Every political system has its flaws.
Right.
And so you asked another question, though. Why can't the president just decide to do something
Yes.
and then it's done? Well, the reason why one separates the powers of, let's say in the United States, there's three separate powers. There's the power to make laws, there's the power to enforce laws, and there's the power to decide if a law is not fair, where
Ah,
fairness is decided by both the Constitution and prior decisions about what is fair or not. So, for instance, if I make a law that if the Congress makes a law that says Jay is not allowed to speak outside, you would go to court and the court will say, well, that's not fair because the Amendment 1, the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says everybody has a right to speak.
right.
So Congress would say, oh, well. So in the United States, the judicial branch, like anybody who's a judge all the way up to the Supreme Court, decides which laws are fair or not according to the Constitution. They use the Constitution as their base.
But the Constitution is pretty vague, isn't it?
Well, but that's why then every decision ever made by judges, if it's not in the Constitution, then we abide by those decisions.
Mm,
Or it goes all the way up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, no, we're going to change our mind on this one,
mm.
which is something they did, for instance, with abortion rights recently. The Congress, which is composed of the House of Representatives and the Senate, they make all the laws. And the executive branch, which is run by the President of the United States, he enforces all the laws. And all that means is that if there's a law that's a federal law, then he has the power to, if Congress says taxes are now 99% and somebody doesn't pay their taxes, the president can go to the Treasury Department, which is in the executive branch, and say the IRS, which is run by the Treasury Department, has the right to collect that money from that person, and that person can't sue or anything because it's a law. Or if Congress says we're going to go to war, the president then goes to the Department of Defense and says, we're sending the army to this country because Congress says there's a war. There's also a National Guard, and there's an FBI. There's various law enforcement agencies in the executive branch that are not local. Like the police is local. The president's not in charge of those. But the FBI and the National Guard, they're like the nation's police, and so he can use or an IRS agent or there's various agencies within the executive department that the president can use to enforce laws. Or if Congress says we need to send $1 billion to Florida because of the latest hurricane created $1 billion worth of damage, then the president and the executive branch are in charge of setting up a way for the $1 billion to get to the people who need it in Florida. So they
Gotcha.
enforce all the laws. Now, that is according to the Constitution. Over the years, every branch has changed and taken more and more power. Every branch fights for power in the
Mm,
United States. So the president has now powers like executive orders where he can make his own. He can say, I'm sending this army to Afghanistan, even though Congress has not made it a law that this is a war. So he could do things like that. Or he could say, I'm going to make an executive order that everybody gets $1,000 in a bailout during the pandemic. Now, by the way, the name of our country is the United States of America. So as a country, we're really just a collection of governments called states. So, and
Gotcha.
each one of those states has a judicial, legislative, and executive branch also. So the governor of California is like the president of California. And then there are state senators and state representatives, just like Congress is for federal. And there are state judges all the way up to a Supreme Court of California that decide on state laws. And even in some towns, like New York City has a mayor who's like the president of New York City. Then there's a city council who's like the Congress. And then there are city judges. So it all goes down depending on where, like New York City might have different laws than Los Angeles because the city council of New York City makes different laws than the city council of LA. If someone says, "Oh, I think these laws are unconstitutional," it goes up to the courts in LA and the courts in New York City, and then people could appeal them up to the Supreme Court if they want, but that's very rare. And the mayor or the governor, whoever, is in charge of enforcing those laws. The other thing the president does, which they didn't used to do according to the Constitution, is they can recommend laws to Congress, and then the party that they belong to, like Democrat or Republican, basically follows the president's advice and tries to make the president's agenda laws. There are many ways in which the roles of the president, Congress, and Supreme Court have changed the rules since
Hmm.
the United States started, and some of those have been good, and probably some of those are bad. Like everyone thinks it's in the Constitution that there are 9 Supreme Court judges. There is no specified number of judges in the Supreme Court. I think the initial Supreme Court had 6 judges, and Roosevelt is an example of someone who tried to stack the Supreme Court. He wanted to have more judges in the Supreme Court so he could appoint more judges because that's a lifetime position. So once you appoint a judge, your influence will be felt for decades if you're a president who appointed a lot of judges.
This whole thing felt like a whole mafia organization.
It's kind of like that. Like, I don't know what mafia organizations are really like, but let's take the model in both The
Right.
Sopranos and The Godfather and assume that that is fact. Probably it's close to fact that there's a Godfather who's sort of like the president, and he enforces. Actually, I think mafia organizations are more like fascist organizations where
Mhm.
there is one person who is basically in charge of everything. They make
Right.
the laws, they enforce them, they decide what's fair, and then they appoint people below them to execute on those. And those people can govern however they want, but typically they, again, do the same structure. They're like the dictators of their area.
Right.
Someone's like the godfather of the metropolitan area around New York. He might have capos, sub godfathers who are like in charge of New Jersey or Connecticut or whatever. Also, I should mention a fascist, and this is often forgotten in the definition. And when people call someone a fascist usually supports capitalism,
Mm.
but heavy government control of fascism. So a lot of people will disagree with me on this. We had a very controversial thing in 2020 when, because of the pandemic, the United States, and I don't even know if it was Republican or Democrat, but the United States told every business to shut down unless you were, a needed business in emergencies. Government control of business is a very fascist tendency.
Mm.
And this is why, fascism is often associated with the far right. And that's often true because there's an element of fascism that says we are superior to other people, so we have more rights and so on. And the most superior person is the dictator. So there's an element of fascism that's kind of like a far right stance. But there's also an element of fascism that's far left, which is kind of a populist control of business. Like these business leaders are unfair, so we're going to take control of their businesses to make them more fair. Or we're going to decide what the correct allocation of resources in society because we know better than the markets. Stalinist Russia, Stalin was a fascist, and Maoist China,
Right.
Mao and Stalin were both communists and fascists.
I mean that's not good for society, isn't it? Like it just have like people decide what's good for society or decide what the market should be.
Yeah, no, that's horrible for society because think about it. Right now, New York City is a good example, or London is a good example, or LA is a good example. London does not produce enough food to feed the people of London. Like there are not these huge farms or food factories or whatever in London producing enough food to feed the people of London. And that's true for, Moscow and Beijing and every city almost. And yet in communist countries, people often starve because the dictator and the central group that's running the country, they often try to figure out these 5-year plans, how to buy all the food from wherever to feed the people in their country. Well, the United States doesn't do that. We just use the market. So, like, market forces decide the prices and the supply and the demand of all the food. So, if there's a lot of demand for hamburgers, then companies like McDonald's, I'm just hypothetically saying, or let's say grocery stores like Target or Walmart or whatever, they might say, oh, there's a lot of demand for meat. So let's find all the farmers we can in the United States and buy meat from them. Let's find all the meat from Argentina as a big source of supply of beef. Let's find all the meat and we'll buy them for cheap prices because we'll buy in bulk and then we'll sell because we know that there's demand. So in a fascist or communist dictatorship, just a few people try to decide in advance what all the demand and supply and prices should be for food. And they often get it wrong because it's
Right.
impossible. There's a million variables involved. Market oriented economy like the United States, I'm not even calling it a capitalist economy, it's just a market oriented economy. Market forces decide how much beef is needed, how much vegetables are needed, what the price of them should be, where we should get them from. Like that's all decided by the market. The president, the Congress, the Supreme Court have zero or have 1% to do with it. Sometimes they say, "Oh, this food's really bad for you, so we're going to make it illegal." But that's very rare. Mostly we can eat whatever food we want. Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
I could be totally wrong. I could be totally naive because I don't know anything. Does that also relate to Federal Reserve increase, like, rate or inflations as well?
Yes, completely. Every department of government, like let's say the Department of Education, let's say the IRS, let's say the Federal Reserve, let's say the Department of Agriculture, they're all like mini fascist governments. And again, I'm not saying good or bad because they have best intentions. Even Lenin, who was the
Right.
first, head of Soviet Russia, and even Mao was the first head of communist China. I'm going to assume for a second they had, at the very, very beginning of their careers, good intentions, which is that people would be better if everybody was a little bit more fair about the allocation of resources. So they said, well, at first, we need to allocate the resources to make things fair. And then eventually the people will be able to do it themselves. And I am just the first citizen, the first person to do it.
Mm.
But you look at it, the Federal Reserve right now, they made an arbitrary decision, which is that we were having too much inflation and we need to raise interest rates, because when the interest rates are raised, people spend less.
Right.
The reason they spend less is because there's more incentive for them to put money in the bank where they get interest on their money rather than spend the money. So there's more incentive to save. And when interest rates are higher, it's also harder to buy things where you're borrowing money, like on a credit card or a mortgage or whatever. It's more expensive to buy things because if you're borrowing money. So people don't buy houses because the monthly payment on your mortgage, which is a loan from the bank, is higher because interest rates are higher. So like if you buy a house today as opposed to a year and a half ago, you're paying double the monthly rate, and people don't want to do that. So they don't borrow. It's too expensive for them. So less money is spent. So many businesses go out of business. And when you raise interest rates, there's a great possibility of a recession. Now, if we didn't have a Federal Reserve, what could have happened was that market forces then take over. And market forces might have said, well, the price of beef is getting too expensive, so more and more people will start eating fish or vegetables or whatever, something cheaper. Or they'll find, Walmart will find sources of food that are cheaper. Inflation would maybe naturally go down. Then also we would have gotten a chance to see what inflation was transitory. So for instance, some of the inflation that we're experiencing is because of the war between Russia and Ukraine. So oil potentially is in trouble, and wheat. We get a lot of wheat from both the Russia and Ukraine. So price of wheat has gone up. And because of the pandemic, our supply chains with China have had problems. So some of that inflation happened. And because we didn't build houses for 2 years and nobody was cutting down trees, there was a shortage in lumber now that we are building houses again. And the price of lumber went up, which means the prices of houses went up to build a house. So some of that inflation was temporary and will get worked out. But the Federal Reserve was worried about extreme inflation. And consequently, they're raising interest rates so fast, they don't have a chance to see if those interest rates work yet or not, since it takes 18 months for interest rates to be felt by the system. And they haven't even been raising interest rates for 18 months. So we don't even know yet what the full effect of interest rates will be. Unfortunately, there might be a recession that's completely artificial. It's completely caused by the Federal Reserve.
Why didn't they just
Inflation is not necessarily a bad thing, by the way.
right?
We've had inflation for the past 120 years, basically ever since the Federal Reserve was created, and a lot of inflation since we went off the gold standard in 1971. What's happened since that time? Well, the medical and lifespans have increased, literacy levels have increased. Silicon Valley has made supercomputers that we could put in our pockets with cell phones these days. Biotech has rapidly, been curing diseases, and AI now is going to increase productivity everywhere. So inflation is not necessarily a bad thing, just hyperinflation is. And the way you cure hyperinflation is you make sure the country as a whole is innovating faster than the economy is growing. And in the United States, that's always been true. Like we're the most innovative. Most inventions come from the United States. We're the most innovative country on the planet. So we've been able to avoid inflation for the most part, despite all the money printing by the Federal Reserve. We've been able to absorb that because we're creating more and more products and innovating new technologies and
Right. But
so on.
what would you say the last innovations that US has did?
Well, AI,
Mm.
ChatGPT is an innovation. Now, the principles of AI have been known for a while. Like, yes, there's some innovation in neural networks in ChatGPT. I'm not going to explain all
Yeah.
of what that is, but the idea of taking every single thing ever written until the year 2021, that's essentially like everything, every book, every Wikipedia page, every Reddit page, every tweet, every article, all the way up to 2021 is in ChatGPT. the idea of taking so much knowledge of history, like ChatGPT is essentially like the Library of Alexandria from ancient times. Like it's all the knowledge in the world, and then using neural networks. And again, I'm not going to explain the specifics of how ChatGPT works, but it's used in this way to simulate how humans make decisions and respond to queries, and it has all the data ever created in the world to respond. That's an innovation. And biotech and genomics are huge innovations. Can you imagine? We can edit a gene. And now 20 years ago, to sequence the human genome, it cost $1 billion. Now it costs about $10. And now we can even take a gene and edit it and inject it back into a human and change their lives, cure diseases, and so on. And this is only at the beginning of that industry. It's only the beginning of AI. It's only the beginning of, dare I say it, crypto. It's only the beginning of automated driving and using technologies for energy unrelated to oil, which is both good and bad, but doesn't matter. Like all these things are
Yeah, and
innovations.
obviously, we always will hear like bad things happen to like, okay, self-driving or AI or genomic, but when bad things happen to them, I think it's good because they learn from their mistakes, because, like self-driving, every time they get into accident, that actually is to make sure that won't happen again because, they will self-correct, they will program better and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, did you see what happened today? Like we're recording this on a day where SpaceX sent up a rocket into space. Okay, a rocket costs like billions of dollars to make. And within about 2 minutes, it was about 20 miles high. It was supposed to be a 90-minute it was supposed to go into space and then come back, and it would take about 90 minutes. But after about 2 or 3 minutes, it got about 20 miles high, and the different parts of the rocket had trouble separating, so it exploded.
Yes.
And
Self-destroyed.
the response in SpaceX offices, everybody was wildly cheering because it was, I guess, a new rocket or whatever, and it launched successfully. And now they'll learn a huge amount about what went wrong so that when there's an important mission, it won't explode in the middle of an important mission. And so it's not like we want to celebrate failure, which I think, failure porn happens too frequently, but it's very important to be able to plan for failure so that at the very least, you learn an enormous amount about it. Like why were people in SpaceX cheering when the explosion happened is because it launched, which is very hard to do. This new rocket launched, and so they learned from that. B, they're going to learn what went wrong, and C, it exploded without harming anybody. That worked as well. So many things worked, and now they have an enormous amount of data to learn from. So that's critical.
Yeah. Well, we got sidetracked a little bit. Now get back to the first question that actually asked.
I know. I know. This is like the perfect civics. What's called a civics lesson, a lesson in basic government to someone from Malaysia. That's what
exactly. That's why I'm so curious. Like, why didn't just like the president just like, hey, everyone get $1,000. For everybody.
Well, he did that during the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. Not him though.
And so what happened was everybody got $1,000 and they spent it on food and clothing and so on and houses. And so food got more expensive. Like the inflation happened in the system. But now they don't have the extra $1,000, so prices will come back down. I mean, everyone thought oil was going to go to like 200. Well, guess what? Oil is below to where it's like half of what its high was. I don't know the exact price of oil right now.
Right.
It's $77. I mean, it's down from what was its high during
I think
the
it was
pandemic?
160. Or was it 200?
No, it was like 105, I guess.
105? I thought it's higher.
So it's down like 30%. Things work themselves out.
Yeah.
I'm not like a huge libertarian, which believes in no government, but look at like the Department of Education, which was formed, I think, in like late 1970s, like 1977 or 78. Ever since then, the U.S. has gone down in its competitiveness with other countries in the quality of our education. So we would have been better off, maybe. I mean, it would have to be really looked at. Maybe we would have been worse off, but it seems like we would have been better off without a Department of Education. Like, what did they do to sort of ruin things?
Right.
I don't know the answers, but it's something worth looking at and thinking about. But government never shrinks. Once the government has claimed more power over our lives, they never give it back.
Okay, so now we get to the first question This is asked by one of the user on notepad.com, jneji13. So the question is, what do you think the future of politics and voting looks like in 10 years?
Well, it's a great question. Here's the thing. The technical reason I am officially running for president, Altucher 2024, you can buy a sign on Amazon that says Altucher 2024. I don't even know who's selling it, but I bought a sign myself and I have it right next to me.
Can you show it?
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah.
Altucher 2024.
Yeah.
I didn't make this sign. Someone on
That's
Amazon made this
amazing.
sign.
Right.
And here's the thing. You should run for president too. Jay, even you should. You're not allowed to run for president.
Yeah.
You're not a citizen and you weren't born here. But it took me 10 minutes. You go to fec.gov. FEC stands for the Federal Elections Commission. And you fill out some forms. And now you're a candidate for president of the United States. Knock yourself out. You have a platform. Everyone says, oh, if you don't vote, you're not allowed to say anything. First off, that's against the First Amendment. Second off, do it even one better. Run for president. And the two-party system is horrible. So just have your own political party and run for president. And that forces you to think about what you believe in and research things and say things. Everybody just takes their knowledge from the newspapers, which are all untrue, so opinionated, so biased, and so clickbaity to try to get money and advertising dollars. Like, I am not hindered by any of that. We live in a two-party system, though. I'm not any party, but run for president, and that's how you can participate in your politics. Now, to answer your question, Jay, we already did a full Ask Altucher here based on your very first question.
Yes.
And I will answer how I think that politics will be different in 10 years, plus my important policies, which include taxes and economic policy and foreign intervention. These are the two most important things that any country has to deal with. I will answer that in the next Ask Altucher.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
If you have any questions, Jay, what's the URL where they can...
The URL that you can ask James any question is jamesaltuchershow.com/askaltucher. I'm going to say it again, jamesaltuchershow.com/askaltucher.
Or you could tweet and just refer to me at Jay Altucher, and Jay will see that.
Yeah, and the other way you can also do is sign up to notepad.com, notepd.com. It's an open challenge for Ask Altucher on there. So you can go there, you can enter the challenge, I will see it, and I will collect all the questions, and then I'm going to ask the great James Altucher.
See you next time.
When you've watched a tiny kitten grow into a healthy senior cat, you remember why you chose Cat Chow. Because it's backed by 60 years of expertise. Cat Chow makes yummy formulas for cats of all ages, which makes me one happy cat mom.
Diving deep into your passions has never been easier. Thanks to Amazon Prime. You get all-in-one access to the things you need, so you can get more out of the things you love. With a range of services including Prime Video, Amazon Music, and Prime Fast free shipping. Amazon Prime is like your personal mission control for all the things that inspire. From shopping and streaming to saving, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into. It's on Prime.